and a cockroach ran down my arm in the middle of the night. And I said, we need to get pest service. And he looked at me, deadpan eyes. He said, okay, what are we going to do? Like, how are you going to bring in some additional income? That wasn't in the budget.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Seven Figure Journey podcast. I'm your host today. My name is Brett, and I am here with Autumn Fleck. Autumn is the founder and CEO of Precision Signing Agency. They specialize in helping people get their signings done. They help with loan closings and other types of situations where people need to get stuff signed in order for the deal to get done. So they've been doing that for several years now, and I'll let her talk more about it. But I'm grateful, Autumn, that you're here with us on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you, Brett. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and give us a little background so everybody knows who you are and what you're up to. Tell us how you got started with Precision Signing Agency and what you guys specialize in.
Absolutely. So, like many people during the pandemic, I had a reckoning, a moment of not really enjoying what my career path was looking like. It had changed drastically. I had actually worked in the wine industry for about 10 years, was a director of sales for a few wineries out of California. And at one point, I really enjoyed this position. However, with not traveling, being temporarily furloughed, I started becoming a little bit bored by being stuck at home. And so it was the end of 2020, and it actually started with a cockroach. I know this is going to be a really interesting story behind it, but my husband and I budget our year, our personal expenses for the year. It's something that works best for us. I'm the spender, the play offense, and he's the defense. Let's save money. And so for us, in the 16 years of being together, we've figured out that that's the best model. At the time, we were living in North Carolina, and a cockroach ran down my arm in the middle of the night. And I said, we need to get pest service. And he looked at me, deadpan eyes. He said, okay, what are we going to do? Like, how are you going to bring in some additional income? That wasn't in the budget. And I looked at him and I said, you're serious, aren't you? And he goes, yeah. So after I gave him the devil eyes for a minute, I said, all right, you know what? I'm going to go get that notary loan signing thing that you told me about a couple of years ago. My husband's a king of side hustles, and especially real estate side hustles. So he'd actually taken the course on notary loan signing agent back in 2017. So we had two small kids at the time in 2020. I had a 2 and a 3-year old, and I had obviously had a full-time position. And so I said, hey, I'm just going to make a couple hundred extra dollars. Go out and get my notary. In the state of North Carolina, you have to take a course online. Before I had actually received my stamp, I went out and marketed myself to 50 real estate attorneys in the Raleigh area. Lo and behold, my first month, I made over $10,000 as a side hustle. And from there, I made 14, 17,000, and I just kept hustling harder than
And
I
was
ever have in my
I'm sorry to interrupt, Autumn, but was that enough to cover pest control?
life. More than enough. More than
Great.
enough.
Good
And I'm
job.
so
Good job,
thankful
by
for
the
that
way.
cockroach. I hate cockroaches, but I love that one.
Yeah, yeah. Good. That
It
was
it truly
that's an
that was like
awesome
one of
story.
those moments that changes the trajectory of your life.
Okay, well, we'll
Right?
never forget now how your business started because of a cockroach.
With a
But
cock
congratulations on going to some like right away, 10,000 a month on a side hustle and then growing from there. That's amazing. Um,
well,
yeah,
you
go
know,
ahead.
part of that had to do with the market. I'm not going to discount the fact that the interest rates were historically low, 2.5, 3%. I also knew that I couldn't continue hustling in the same way. I couldn't keep pretending I was working full time over here at my job, which I did a really great job of. I never dropped the ball. I was able to manage both. I like to call that ruthless efficiency. And that's how I've been able to grow and scale my business. I called my mentor and I said, this was about 10 months in, I said, oh, Mark, I have this amazing idea for a new company, completely unrelated to title and loan signing. And he stopped me right there. He said, no. So he kind of burst my balloon. I was like, what do you mean? This sounds fantastic. He goes, no, you haven't dug your well deep enough in what you are doing right now. He said, you're launching your own nationwide loan signing service. You've already got the relationships and the foundation. Now you just need to take it national. I said, okay, this was like a 10-minute conversation, mind you. So it was Halloween weekend at the end of 2021. And overnight, I launched Precision Signing Agency. I went to all of my clients in the Raleigh area and told them, hey, I know you're probably using another signing service outside of this area, but you know and trust me. And why don't you give me a chance? And that's how we got started.
That's a really cool story. Really
Yeah.
cool. All right. Thank you for sharing that backdrop. Now, like the rest of us who are trying to make our businesses go, there are some things that you've learned along the way that have helped you with that scaling challenge, right? At first, you're like hustle, 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 but then it's like, okay, hired my first team member. Now we're growing. And I'm sure you've learned lots of things, but if you could just put your finger on one key lesson that you've learned in scaling your business that might be helpful to others, what would that be?
Yeah, certainly there's been a lot of ups and downs, especially in an industry where I can't control the interest rates.
Mm,
So much of what we do is predicated on loans, and we work with title, escrow, and lenders and real estate attorneys from across the country. And so initially, we scaled incredibly quickly. And a lot of that, again, had to do with the rates that we were at. We went from zero signings a month to 1,000 in 5 months.
mm.
And I was literally building the plane in the air. It was crazy. Definitely a lot of lessons learned. We ended up losing a really big client when the interest rates did go up. They laid off 100 of their 150 team members. And honestly, that was a pretty big kick in the gut. I didn't want to do anything for about 6 weeks when it came to the business. I was questioning, the path that I had taken. I had spent all this time, and something out of my control was kind of taken from me, and I don't think I've ever had such a hard time with. I'm pretty resilient, and I have a lot of grit, but that really rocked me. Around that same time, I actually met a wonderful individual who had worked in the title space. Has been super successful in business. I was actually matched with him through the Small Business Administration, their SCORE program, and I was lucky that he had been in my industry. And so, shortly after this had happened, he said, "Autumn, you're going to get back out there and you're going to continue to grow this business. And if you can continue to grow this business in this market, arguably one of the worst, highest interest rates in 30 years, then there's no doubt that you're going to be successful. You figure out a way to do it. I know you'll figure it out. Just do it." And that's what I needed to really get back out there and say, "All right, no more excuses."
I love that motivation, I guess, from somebody who's been there before, at least knew your industry, a mentor. I want to call that out for everybody listening. A lot of times, because we're resilient, because we figure things out on our own, because we're that super scrappy, gritty entrepreneur, we don't always look for help from other people because we're like, well, I'll just figure it out. And in a moment of maybe discouragement, when the market is giving you some bad signals, it was a mentor. It was somebody else who could help you see something clearly and give you that little nudge. And I love that share. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
Um,
and entrepreneurship can be really lonely. I think getting into it, nobody told me that, especially starting a business in the middle of the pandemic and also a virtual business like I have. We don't have a brick and mortar. And so a lot of the times, unless I'm sharing information, nobody really knows what I'm doing, and nobody knew all the hard work and the intense hours and everything it took to build the business. And a lot of times there was no one to talk to about it because people didn't understand, or they just don't want to hear about it. That's one of the kind of most interesting things about entrepreneurship I found, and I'd love your opinion on this too, Brett, is I find that, when someone gets a promotion, everyone's very excited. Let's go out and celebrate, kind of in the corporate context of positions. But when you're an entrepreneur and you have a success, if you're sharing that with a non-entrepreneur, it doesn't land in the same way. It
yeah.
almost feels like bragging, even though you're not bragging, but people aren't as receptive to it, and that was an interesting kind of learning moment for me as being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I love that you're bringing this up, Autumn. I want to dig in a little bit more on this loneliness concept because we all experience it as business owners. I started a business later in life. You had a corporate position already. I think you mentioned for 10 years. Not everybody goes right into entrepreneurship as a younger person, and for those of us who maybe stepped in a little bit later, I remember distinctly the moment when I took on this business full time. I'd been doing it as kind of like a side hustle with something else, kind of like you described. But then when I went to this is my thing full time, I immediately felt this weight, especially because I had one full time team member at the time. Now there's seven of us, but at the time there was just one, and I just felt this weight of, if this doesn't work, what does that mean for my family? I have kids, you have kids. What does that mean for my family? What does that mean for my team member or team members? Like, there's just this thing, and it is very, very lonely. So, what was that like for you to go from, I don't know, the relative safety, I guess, of having a job that was for somebody else versus the taking the leap and experiencing the loneliness?
Yeah, I think for me, again, I've mentioned that my husband and I, we've been together for quite a long time and kind of grown up together. We met when I was 21, and we're in very different financial space, very different career space, just mindset. Um, in our early 20s, and we have the difference in risk tolerance as well. My dad was an entrepreneur, and I just have this, and I've always had this like unabashed confidence that, like, oh, it's going to work, and if it doesn't work, then I pivot. And there's certainly been times where I've failed in life, and other things. I applied it to a grad program, and I think I applied 2 years in a row and made it to like the final round and didn't make it, and thank goodness I didn't. Like, I can't imagine my life if I did, but at the time, it was hard, but I pivoted. I said, okay, well, that didn't work, so let's try something else. And so for me, having that runway of having this as a side hustle, and a proven side hustle at that, I had actually matched, if not exceeded, my salary in 10 months.
Hmm.
So I had given myself this runway. And I think for my husband, it made him more comfortable with me saying, hey, I'm taking a step back. I'm giving up this, what I like to call the golden handcuffs of, this cushy corporate job that's easy. I understand how it works. I know the yearly cycle. I have these great benefits like this vacation, all of that. I'm going to give that up because I know that this has been successful. So let me pivot, and I gave myself that extra cushion. And for me, that's really what helped kind of position myself to be ready to start that business and take the leap.
Well, I'm glad you did, and it sounds like many of your clients are very happy that you took that leap, because now they benefit from what you're creating at Precision Signing Agency. Not to mention the other people who are part of your business now, team members, partners, all that kind of stuff. So, um, anyway, that's so cool. Thank you for sharing some of the good things that you've learned, or some of the wisdom that you've gained over the last few years. Let's shift gears and just acknowledge together that entrepreneurship is messy, and there's still things that we're learning and doing as we grow, and so it's not all smooth sailing from here. So what has been a challenge for you? We talked before we hit record about the concept of, you know of course I could use more help in multiple areas in my business, but like, how do I know which one to move forward with? So why don't you set this up in a way that makes sense for you, and then we'll dig into that topic together.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I tell my existing team right now, often as an entrepreneur, an owner, founder, CEO, that people don't realize, most of the time I'm just winging it. I mean, not all the time, but a lot of the time I'm figuring it out on the fly. And I think that adaptability and being nimble is so important. But they'll come to me and ask me a question. I'm like, I don't know the answer to that. Like, I've been in charge of IT and finances and all these things. I shouldn't be in charge of that, but as a CEO, like, when you're first starting, you are in charge of all of these things, and website development, all these skills that I certainly did not have. But I'm like, you know what? I'm going to figure it out. You have to have that attitude that you're just going to figure it out. I'm now at that point where I can say, look, I'm not really great at this. I need someone else to do this for me. And so I'm at that point in the business where I've started to delegate, and I definitely have a strong personality, and I'm very efficient in what I do. So that's been a little bit of a challenge for me to let go. For me, the day to day scheduling part of what we do here at Precision Signing Agency, which is kind of like the heart of what we do, I've had to take myself out of that, and I'm glad that I've done that. And I finally have a team that I'm super comfortable with to run that day to day. But now we're scaling so quickly that I want to do it sustainably. And sustainably, I mean, I cannot compromise the level of customer service and what we're offering to our clients. But I also want to continue to grow. So, how quickly do I bring on different positions, and I've identified what positions I eventually need, but in what order, what's most important to take off of my plate. So that's something that's most challenging. Interestingly, I was part of a networking group here locally that I really enjoyed socially, but it was taking away from like the doing of being in my business. And so I jumped out recently, and it was interesting. They're like, why are you jumping out? I was like, I don't need a coach to tell me, what I need to focus on. I need to be in my business. I need to identify what I'm doing and delegate so I can do what I do best, which is this relationship management and sales and marketing.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a great issue, Autumn, and a lot of us struggle with these same issues where, at first, the virtue of a good entrepreneur is that they'll jump in and figure it out, like you have. I'm going to get in there. I'm going to figure it out, whether it's bookkeeping, website development, whatever it is. Like I'm the one that has to figure that out, and so you do, and you get it up and going. Then when it comes time to offload that, so you can work on higher value added activities in the business, how do you figure out how to give that to other people, and in what order? Who do I hire first? Right. So especially when you're growing as fast as you're describing, you could use three full-time people like next month, but the business isn't quite there from a financial perspective, right? So it's like, I need all those people, can't quite afford them yet, but I'm going to need them soon, and in which order? So great issue. Let's dig into it a little bit further. um, it sounds like, and when you said, I kind of know the positions I'm going to need, like you've got that all mapped out, and good for you. I would like to take this opportunity to share with others that one of the keys to this whole figuring out which role to hire next is clarity about the future org chart for the business. An org chart could be a stuffy name, especially in an entrepreneurial context, but think about the future organization of how work gets done in your business. So precision signing agency isn't what it will be. Right now it's May of 2024. Whenever this gets published in the next several weeks, we're having this interview on in May of 2024. Well, 3 years from now, you have a specific objective, hopefully some sort of mission that you're up to. And you kind of know what that business needs to look like in the future. You know what roles you're going to have because you know how work will be organized. That's the very first thing that I recommend to anyone who's trying to figure out which role next. You need to you need to first understand, what am I trying to accomplish in the longer term? What does it look like in the future? If I could just like time travel to the future, here's what the business will look like then I can work my way back to where we are now. So that's the first thing. I think you already have a sense of that a little bit in the language that you used. So now you have several future roles in mind. Which one do you hire next? So let's dig in on that. Autumn, you mentioned that you are pretty strong on the relationship side. Sounds like you're great at that. Sales and marketing side. So what I'll call the client acquisition front end side of the business. Most of us have a front of the house and back of the house, right? There's a get the clients, serve the clients, support the clients, but then there's like the IT, finance, back of the house kind of stuff. So the way that I would look at this is, what next hire would either free me up to do more of what I'm great at, or provide some additional leverage in the business that might be getting ignored today. So, for example, let's use the example of bookkeeping. If you're spending, I don't know, let's how much time do you spend on a given week or month, do you think, on bookkeeping?
So that's a great question. Because our industry is very kind of, I shouldn't say old school, checks are typically cut to all of the people involved with escrow.
Mm,
And even though we may do several hundred signings per month for a particular client, we get an individual check. And as exciting as it is to get hundreds and thousands of checks every month, that is arduous and time consuming. And
yeah,
so we all of a sudden have gone from maybe spending ten hours a month to maybe 15 or 20 hours and just keeping on top of depositing and recording and reconciling our books. And that's not my specialty.
yeah. But you've done it because who else is going to do it when you're the CEO and you've hired other people to do other stuff? So
Fractional bookkeeper, that's who.
yeah, exactly. And it's not so much the specific solution in this case that matters, it's the principle. But the principle is, if you're spending a significant chunk of time every month on an activity, and you can get somebody in here to take that off your plate, now you have 20 hours a month that you can spend on other activities. So that might be a candidate for your next hire. The other thing to consider is that I guess I'll call it affordability thing, right? So one variable is around what would free me up to do higher value add activities. The other variable is around the affordability of the hire. So in the case of a fractional situation, you know you can get enough of the help that you need without committing to a full-time headcount with benefits and all the other expenses. So that's an important consideration when deciding which hire to bring on next. Um, the other thing I would think about though is if it's a revenue generating role, bookkeeping isn't. But let's say you're able to bring somebody in that could help bring more business in, then that expense is viewed a little bit differently than the back of the house bookkeeping expense.
Well, that was kind of my next question, and this is something that has continued to come up over and over again. I have people reaching out to me to sell me leads or like email lists and all this all the time, and or calls. I'm like, I don't need help with that. I am in a situation where I'm inundated with leads, but my follow up, like I try my best, but I am one person. So someone had recommended recently, like maybe an inside salesperson. Like you need someone to be your follow up because you're the face, you're the initial, like gain the business, but all that follow up once we're onboarding them, there's a whole onboarding situation as well and training. Like that's something that is coming to mind that, like, hey, maybe I need to do that.
Yeah, let me ask you this, Autumn. If you were to bring in all the business that's coming your way, would that overwhelm your fulfillment capabilities today? Or do you have the fulfillment capabilities that you like? Which one is in a better off situation today, the fulfillment or the acquisition?
So it's a delicate balance, and I know exactly how many signings that our current team can handle. And I also know how quickly I need to bring on a new scheduling team member. And it's just like this delicate dance back and forth. And my
Yeah.
team, I know they've been overwhelmed the last month because they said, like, wow, you've done your job really well, Autumn. I'm like, thanks, guys. But it's like put them in a position of like things got crazy really quickly. So it's like, okay, this person, and then maybe someone in inside sales. But again, it's that timing, it's the resources, the timing. I'm not great at training. I'm pretty impatient. I, say things once and I'm like, don't did you get it? So my team has definitely said like maybe you should have someone else train. So again, maybe identifying someone that I already have on the team that could help with that as well. So I'm not dividing more of my resources.
Yeah, so you're bringing up another great point that we all have to wrestle with, and I'll call it resource or staffing plan, right? Like how many I'll call them fulfillment resources do you need to handle X number of signings? And if you know that modeling and you can project your growth, then you have to keep that at a level that that doesn't drop, or else you start to get bad reviews, right? Bad reputation. You start getting upset clients, and they want to leave you and go somewhere else. So you know you have to maintain a certain quality of experience on the delivery side, but that one, it sounds like you got it pretty dialed in on the modeling. So you know how many people you need per X number of signings. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah,
Generally, yeah.
generally. And I hear you on the fine dance. So but that's the it's almost like a seesaw. Remember we used to have those teeter totters, I think, when we
Mhm.
were younger. I think they're pretty much outlawed now. I never see them, but back and forth, one goes up, one goes down. And the acquisition fulfillment balance in our businesses is always doing this back and forth. At some point we'll be too high on the acquisition, and our fulfillment team will be saying, ouch, like we're getting overwhelmed, we're getting crushed. And then we'll have enough over there and we'll be saying we don't have enough business, right? And so it is a delicate balance. uh, the other thing that I would start tracking on the affordability side is something I would call revenue per employee. And it's different from this balancing act. It's total revenue divided by the team members. And if you're using like part-time contractors, fractional resources, then I would just do a full-time equivalent. So let's say you have 3 part-time people and you have 5 full-time people. I would, maybe they're each half-time. So maybe you've got 6.5 total, and you're dividing that into the total revenue for the business. So I take the total revenue for the month and I divide by the total full-time equivalent for the month. And if you track that every single month, you'll see interesting patterns over time, Autumn. You'll see our business feels very healthy financially when we're at this revenue per employee. And of course, as business owners, we want that number to be really high, right? Tons of revenue per employee. We want that. It's more profitable. But you'll notice, because you'll balance this out with what your team is telling you, like, oh, we're getting squished over here. We need more help. You'll start to see the patterns of when it's kind of the perfect spot for revenue per employee for your business, at least until you get some more economies of scale built in. And so let's just use round numbers for fun. Let's say it's $200,000 per employee that you're able to bring in. If that number starts to go up to 230,000, 260,000 per employee, you're feeling great as the shareholder of the business, right? As the owner, but your team's starting to squeak a little bit more like, whoa, we're starting to get overwhelmed. Then you hire somebody and immediately that number drops, let's say down to 180,000 per employee. You're like, whoa, that doesn't feel good as the business owner. That feels less efficient until they get ramped up and they start to pull their weight. And then that number starts to go back up. So I would watch this balance between acquisition and fulfillment in your business. And, if you're sort of triangulating information like a GPS system, I would use this revenue per employee thing that we were talking about. And I would use the original point we were talking about of what do I need to be freed up from as a business owner? What's my area of genius, my unique abilities, my strengths, whatever word you'd like to use for that. If I'm not spending more and more of my time doing those things, then the business is suffering in some way because I'm getting dragged down by doing accounting tasks, or I don't know, looking at my email or whatever. So you're sort of triangulating using these three different perspectives to get to the, like, what would be the next best hire for my business in an affordable way. Does that
I
help?
think that's Yeah, that's a really, really great perspective, and I hadn't really thought about that. We track our metrics and we're able to see, our revenue per signing, but we've never looked at it as like versus a team member. So I think that's really helpful, and I'll definitely drill down, especially with like the past year already, the 5 months that we've had or 4 months that we've had of data. I think something that I'd love your advice or a follow up question to that is I have a couple of these positions identified. Right, we talked about this kind of seesaw. We've got the scheduling. I need some fractional bookkeeping over here, maybe some inside sales. For me, having a director of operations to run the day to day. So I'm extracted from that. I'm the problem solver. I'm the fixer. I come in when there's an issue. Um, at what point do I hire that person? Are they after these other roles? I don't know. Like that would help free up so much of my time, but that hire is going to be more expensive than any of the other ones.
Totally. Thank you for asking that question. I think a lot of us have this nirvana concept of, if I could just bring an amazing person in to take a bunch of this off my plate and free me up. And I love that concept personally. The reality is that most business owners aren't in a place, their business isn't mature enough to be able to take on that level of expense. And so if you have healthy enough profit margins, and or you've built up enough cash reserve because you did so well early on, or this was more of a side hustle, and maybe you and your husband come to a conversation or an agreement around the household finances and the budgeting that you talked about that you did so well. Maybe there's a period of time where you decide it's okay for us to be lean on what we take out of the business, in hopes that we get this person in, we get things going, and then they free you up to do a lot more business building activity or a lot more growth activity. So the timing for that kind of hire is going to be a little different for everybody based on their situations. I think it's going to come down to, when are you personally ready to take on that level of expense in the business, and or reduce what you're willing to take home for a time. And if you decide to go down that path, you need to be really clear. It's going to be for this amount of time, and I will know, I will see milestones along the way that this is working or it's not, so that I can pull the plug on it if it's not, right? Because you don't want to go, let's say you have 6 months of runway to make this work, and then you go 5 months in and you're like, it doesn't feel like it's working. You're like, you want to know by month one, what are our success metrics around this? How will we both know that it's working? You and the person that you've hired. Well, you and your husband, maybe it's all three of it. You and your husband know it's working personally, and the person that you hired knows it's working as well. And so you want like little gates or success metrics along the way that says this is how we'll both know that it's working. So it's a great question. I think it's a little different for everyone given their personal finance situation and the profitability in the business, what's available to invest. If the money's not available to invest that, then you have to keep building the team out on your own until it gets to a place where you can afford to bring that in.
That's great advice. That's a great way to think about it. I appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you've been super open with questions that not only help you, but everybody else who's dealing with similar stuff in their businesses. So, thank you for being a fantastic guest on our show. Autumn, if people want to learn more about Precision Signing Agency or connect with you on social, how would they go about doing that?
Great question. You can visit our website. It is a little bit long. It's www.precisionsigningagency.com. You can find me on LinkedIn under Autumn Fleck, and you can also find our company on there as well.
Okay, and we'll have all that information in the show notes. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode. Please share, like, review, do all those things to help as many seven-figure business owners as possible listen to this great episode with Autumn and all the other ones that we're putting out on a regular basis. We want to help as many business owners as possible grow the business and achieve the life that they always dreamed of. All right, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Brett.